Today I'm down in Southern California taking a look at Audi's most important model. This is the all-new 2025 Q5. And calling it important is probably putting it mildly, because not only is the Q5 the best-selling Audi currently, it's the best-selling Audi of all time, and it's only been out since 2008. So that should give you some idea of how many Q5s Audi actually sells, and why it's really important that they get this one right. I think the best thing for me to do is just grab the camera so we can go in for a look together. Audi has said that they want a little bit more harmony in their design language, so the front end certainly gives me a lot of Audi Q6 e-tron. We have this bigger, bolder grille here. Of course, it's going to change if you get the SQ5. This currently here is just a Q5. We have the latest LED matrix headlights here with adjustable DRL signatures. That's kind of a cool touch, but you're only going to find that in the top trim. This module here has multiple LEDs, and you can actually change the LED pattern and design in the instrument cluster software. You can see that not all the cooling is happening up there. In fact, this lower portion is kind of blanked out, somewhat similar to what we find in the e-tron versions. And then there's the extra cooling grate with the twin sensors down there in that lower portion of the bumper. Audi really accentuated the angry headlight design with this interesting fin here that actually kind of curves out from the vehicle a little bit. We then have the headlight washer behind that little door and an air curtain inlet there just below that to help improve aerodynamics. Now, as you'd expect, this is the largest Q5, but it's really not that much bigger than the outgoing model. We're really just talking fractions of an inch, and the wheelbase, that's essentially the same as before. With such an important product, Audi clearly did not want to alienate existing Q5 owners or Q5 intenders, but they've made the rear end a little bit swoopier and sexier than before, and if you want a Q5 Sportback, that is coming back for this model year. Now let's take a look at those taillights. Audi has long been known for their lighting game, and that continues for the new Q5. We have OLED inserts in these taillight modules. So this module and this module here are organic light emitting diodes in these little pattern segments. There's also a little pattern segment right there. As with the LEDs up front in the DRL signature, these are configurable. Rather unfortunately, you have to turn off the car and then you can adjust it in the instrument cluster, the infotainment system, and then you can turn the car back on and have the new pattern applied. But it is a really cool touch. Now, sadly, due to stupid lighting laws in the United States, they can't do all the things that they get to do in Europe, where they can actually warn people around, they can make different patterns based on traffic around you, etc. There's definitely a dynamic capability that they get there. Important to some other people is actually going to be what's happening down here, because Audi has finally ditched the fake exhaust tips. Yep, these are actual exhaust tips on the side where real exhaust gas flows. On the downside, this little section up here definitely appears like it's going to be a little bit more difficult to clean. There's a lot of 3D texturing going on there. But as far as washing your Q5 yourself goes, I think all the other lines work really well and be pretty easy to clean. This model has some optional 20-inch wheels that I do think are quite attractive, although I think actually some of the other Audi wheels are a little bit better to my eye. At least for the moment, there are just two engine options in the United States. We have a 2-liter turbo making 268 horsepower. That's in the regular Q5. Whereas the SQ5 gets a 3-liter turbo V6 producing 362 horsepower and a whopping 406 pound-feet of torque. Both engines are mated to a standard 7-speed dual-clutch transmission and standard all-wheel drive, so you don't have to check that option box if you don't want to. This is, of course, going to be the most fuel-efficient version at 25 miles per gallon combined, and if you're worried about the dual-clutch transmission, I would say stay tuned for the drive video. Rather unfortunately, I can't tell you how this vehicle drives, but that's coming up quite soon. And I will say that they've made some significant refinements to that DCT over the years. Behind the power hatch, which sports the new white Audi logo, we find a little bit more cargo capacity than before, and one of the larger cargo areas in this segment, but certainly not the largest. On the other hand, it is one of the more practical, because as I said, the second row seats slide forward and backward. We also have a 40-20-40 folding rear seat back, which I wish every entry in this segment had. And if you get the adaptive air suspension, there's some buttons over here to allow you to lower the suspension for easier loading and unloading. You can also fold those seats right from back here if you want to, rather than walking around and folding it from the front, something that some manufacturers don't really take into account. Let me scoot this bag out of the way so we can see what's going on under the floor. There is a little bit of additional storage space, and if you want a space saver spare tire, if I could spit that out, a space saver spare tire, one would be able to fit in this storage well if you were interested in, because in some world markets, The Q5 is actually going to have a spare tire standard. And that's why they've really made sure that this subwoofer, which is actually over here, is really, really slim. It's very eccentrically shaped, but that gives us a usable cargo well under the floor. And to give you an idea of how big that cargo area is, the floor is fully in place, and under there, I have my 22-inch roller bag camera bag. So you can actually fit a piece of carry-on luggage this big completely under that floor. Audi also gives you somewhere under that floor where you could put the roller cargo shade, and that's why we have those little cutouts on the side. So if you want to store that roller cargo cover or whatever you want to call it that normally docks right back there, you can do that under the load floor, but this model doesn't have that particular feature. New Audi means new seats, but they didn't reinvent the wheel. So these are really going to be familiar if you've driven an Audi in the past or own an existing Audi model. We have a manual seat thigh cushion extension there, four-way adjustable lumbar support, and a power memory link tilt telescopic steering column. Most of the interior dimensions are pretty similar to the outgoing model. They change a little bit here with a little bit more headroom, a little bit more legroom here and there, but again, very, very similar to the outgoing model. That means that if you're a taller driver, you might want to look at this before you look at some of the other options, because the front seat tracks do move really quite far rearward. And I would probably move this several inches forward to accommodate me as a 6-foot tall driver. Headroom, that's also really generous. With the front seat adjusted for me, I have plenty of room in the back, maybe about 7 inches of knee room left. I suspect you'd have no problem fitting an infant seat behind me in the driver's seat. Now, versus some of the competition like a Volvo XC60 or the Acura or certain Lexus models, you'll notice that we have a much bigger hump back here in the rear. And that's simply because of that rear-wheel drive drivetrain design that we don't find in an XC60 or a Lexus RX. If you want a bigger back seat, you could look at an RX or a Nautilus. They're going to be about the same price range as this Q5. Keep in mind, those are bigger vehicles, but they're not quite as premium. And that's why the price range and size don't align quite right. Back here, we find USB-C charge ports nice and high, so that we're probably not going to kick them and break that connector off. And you can optionally get 100 watts of USB-C charging back here. We have air vents, heated rear seats, also 3-zone automatic climate control. But more importantly, we also have really comfortable back seats. These are actually some of the most comfortable back seats in this segment. We have plenty of headroom, plenty of legroom, maybe about ½ an inch or so with this panoramic moonroof right there, and a surprising amount of recline. These seats move about 4 inches. This is the most upright position, and then we have a pretty aggressive recline as well. Of course, if you want to get the most recline out of the seat, you actually have to scoot it forward a little bit, because these seats slide forward and backward, something that we don't find in too many two-row vehicles like this. That really improves cargo practicality, because if you've got kids in the back and you're going for a long-distance journey away and you want that extra luggage space, as long as they're forward-facing, you could scoot these seats several inches further forward, still have kids comfortably in the back, and get a lot of extra cargo space back there in the rear. We also have well-positioned latch anchors down there and a shoulder belt that comes out of the seat back itself, not out of the ceiling, so it's going to be a lot easier to center some of those child seats right here in the way back. Then we get the 40-20-40 folding seat design that we see in other European vehicles, and some big cup holders right there in the middle of everything. Up on the ceiling, we find touch controls for the LED map lights, a button for the panoramic moonroof, the SOS button, slide to the side sun visors with mirrors and LED lights. All 4 positions have grab handles in the ceiling to help you get in and out of the vehicle a bit more easily. That front pane on that panoramic moonroof opens, and the back part extends to almost the rear passengers' heads. Now, moving back up front, we have what look like adjustable head restraints for the driver and front passenger, but they are in fact fixed in this trim. We have height adjustable shoulder belts, however, for both front seat positions. The side bolstering in the front seats is relatively aggressive, but fortunately there's a lot of shoulder room, so people with broader shoulders shouldn't have any problem with these seats, and the side bolsters are really going to help keep you in place, especially if you get the SQ5. Now, there is an optional sport seat in the SQ5. It is relatively similar to the S5 sedan, which I was able to experience, and even in that S5, there's still a pretty decent amount of shoulder room, which is something that I appreciate. We also get moderate bolstering for that seat bottom cushion, and then an extendable thigh cushion, which really helps out the taller people from getting too much leg fatigue. Moving over to the front doors, we find obviously hard plastics down there at the bottom of the door, just like we find in most of the competition, but we have larger storage areas, so if you have those huge water bottles that people love carrying around, don't worry, one of those is going to fit over there in that door. And then we have lots of soft touch materials on the upper sections of the door. So this off-white or ivory insert right there in the middle, that's all soft touch, as is the upper section of the door. I'll show you on the driver's side door, but it has kind of a tiered motif where these 3 sections of the door kind of dish out or layer on top of one another. Now, moving over to the dashboard, that is where we start finding some controversy, because if you do not get the model with the optional passenger screen, we are driving that model. I'll show you what the other one looks like by simply turning off this screen. That's what it's going to look like if you don't get the optional passenger screen, because we still have this big plastic section in the dashboard. I do think that's a bit of a misstep. I kind of wish that they had given us a completely different dashboard design if you didn't opt for this screen, since it's only going to be in the Prestige trims. Now, this screen does a bit more than some passenger screens. So you can see we can stream with YouTube, we can see the weather, we can Yelp there, we can also get the factory navigation with satellite imagery if you have that particular option turned on. If we go over here to what looks like CarPlay, you'll notice it just lets you interact with your playlist. So no actual car playing on this display. Because of the streaming apps, Audi uses two different display technologies in the dashboard. The passenger side screen is a regular LCD. It then has effectively a shutter inside, so that way the passenger can watch that streaming media while the driver is paying attention to the road. And from the driver's perspective, that display would look black when that was in operation. Then we have an organic light emitting diode display here for the main infotainment system, and also for the big LCD instrument cluster over here. The reason for this is that these provide darker blacks and a dimmer display at night. So even though the colors are really vibrant during the day, when you're driving down the road, it's not going to be glaring at you like, for instance, a Chevy Blazer EV's display will. Those displays are really big, and even though they're black most of the time, they still appear really bright and really distracting at night. This does not have that particular problem because it's made of separate little organic light emitting diodes. The software is the latest from Audi. So over here we have a home menu where you can see, for instance, your media there. You can also see your navigation. Downloadable apps are also available on this screen, including YouTube if you're parked, racing, games, things like that, Amazon's Alexa, all that's available here. Of course, CarPlay, Android Auto, etc. This also supports the latest ultra-wideband digital key functionality if you want to use your smartphone as a key. Now, speaking of smartphone, of course, there is a regular Bluetooth interface if you want to do that, but we have CarPlay enabled because I find that one simply a lot easier to deal with. Down here we find direct access touch buttons for the climate control system, and you can voice command just about everything in here. So you can say, "Hey Audi, set the temperature to 72 degrees. Even though I slurred my words there a little bit, you could see it actually understood me. You can have it take you to destinations, adjust things. You can even say, hey, just my feet are cold, things like that. And then we have this light bar across the dashboard that helps you know what the system is up to, including ambient lighting and then indications that the turn signals are on. So for instance, I have the turn signal on there that was flashing, and it works to let you know that the Hey Audi system is understanding you. So, hey Audi, my feet are cold.
Your feet are being warmed.
And now it's going to start roasting my feet, which I'm going to have to go in here and definitely turn off because they do get really toasty really quickly. So below that, we have a big wood strip that runs across the dashboard. I have to say, I like the fact that Audi is bringing wood back and really putting it front and center in the dash, because I think that does look really attractive. It's kind of a matte finish and it runs from one side to the other. On the passenger side, we have a dual bin and slot style compartment. So up here we have a little slot for your instruction manual. Down there we have a bin where you could easily put some of those larger tablet computers safely away. Back to the center, two big air vents there, engine start stop button, the drive select button, that's basically your drive mode. You'd then interact with that system if you want to change or customize your drive modes, or you can just toggle through them with that button right there. Hazard lights, auto start stop. We find a relocated volume and track forward backward control versus some Audis, which have them on this more horizontal section. I find that position simply better. It's easier to find it for one, but also your drinks are less likely to splash on top of it. Over here we have a Qi wireless charging mat that can deliver 15 watts, two USB-C interface ports for the system, more buttons down here. This one is for your safety systems. This takes you over to a menu where you can enable, disable, and customize your active safety setup. And then over here we have a button for the 360-degree camera system, parking sensor display, etc. Toggle style shifter. Lots of shiny black plastic. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I am worried about scratching over time, but we have two big cup holders that are bigger than before, and they've further separated the passenger and driver side areas with this sort of satin chrome section that runs down there, and it has a light pipe inside to give it a little bit of extra visual jewelry at night. One touch I've always appreciated from Audi is this ratchet style armrest, because I find myself really wanting it popped up like that so I can rest my elbow on there for longer journeys. We have a moderately sized storage bin under there. Keep in mind there is a transmission located under there because this is a rear-wheel drive based vehicle, so obviously that transmission has to go somewhere, and that somewhere really is this center tunnel in the vehicle. Moving over to the driver's side, we find the latest instrument cluster software from Audi, which is not quite as snazzy as I think it has been in the past. So no big moving map display or anything like that, but it is configurable. You can configure each of these sides independently of one another, and we have a big color head-up display right there in the dash. The steering wheel, that's a round design with touch controls and 4 spokes, a little bit more of that satin chrome going on here. The touch buttons, they're actually a combination of physical and touch button. It may be difficult to see, but this entire button module actually moves when you press on any of these options. We then have these little bumpered sections here and then touch areas, so that way the system knows what option you're after by where you've pressed on that module. On this side, we find buttons for things like the heated steering wheel, voice command, dedicated track forward, backward buttons, and then cruise control, that's on this stalk right down here. Let's look at that 360 cam a little bit more closely because this has kind of a cool touch. The camera view actually steers as I rotate the steering wheel around, and that's not just for drive, but also for reverse to give you a better look at what's going on. And it's really obvious. You can actually see the bumper section of the car kind of stick out there as that camera digitally steers around. We also have parking sensors that tell you how far you are away from objects, something that we've seen on Teslas before. You can wash the cameras with that little button right there. That's, of course, for the forward view camera. We then have an option to go full screen for the backup camera or the forward view camera. That's also kind of a nice touch. You can hear the parking sensors beeping right there. And then over on this display, we can change that from a back view to a top-down view if we wanted to as well. And you can even focus in on any of these other various camera views if you want some other split views for easier parking or just those really tight parking situations. Also a tiny bit controversial is what's going on the driver's door. So if we look over here and let the camera focus, you'll notice that we have lots of touch buttons. So lock, unlock, we find the headlight controls on the door, mirror controls on the door, folding, unfolding, etc., seat memory controls on the door, and buttons to engage and disengage the child locks on the rear doors. Now, the effect of this is that this button module is pretty wide, so it makes the door grab pretty wide. Now, I said we had that tiered door design. So up here we find a light pipe, speaker grill. This kind of then sticks out a little bit. That's where we have that door handle right there. Kind of what would look like a lock, unlock button area there, but again, they're down there in that touch area. And then we have this big wide module below. If you have smaller hands, this may be a little bit awkward to grab the door and open and close it because we have that latch right there for releasing and you just push it open, but to close it, you find yourself kind of either grabbing on that or just grabbing on the inside. Now moving back over to the dashboard, well, that's open. We have more wood trim, and then we have a small storage cubby right there to the left of the steering wheel. Now it's time for you all to sound off in the comments section. What do you think of the new Audi Q5? Has Audi done enough? Should they have done something more? Should they have given us something different in the dashboard instead of that front passenger screen? If you want to know how this drives, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer because I can't talk about that now, but stay tuned because that video is coming up soon. If I were to change just a few things on the Q5 and SQ5, I would love it if the SQ5 had a torque vectoring axle in the back, something that we do find in the new Audi S5. And if I could change one thing on the interior, I have to admit it would be some alternative to that passenger screen in the versions that didn't have the passenger screen standard. Obviously in the models where you want that feature, that's a really nice location. It's well integrated into the dashboard. It doesn't look overly busy as one huge screen across the dash could, but I kind of wish, I don't know, that we had maybe a stitched leather insert there or maybe wood trim, just something other than a big piece of blank plastic. Let me know what you think about all that. Be sure and stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Find us over at patreon.com, become a member, all those things. And of course, check out the podcast. We'll see all of you later.